Yes, ready to go.
Great. We have two more judges joining us. I'm admitting them. And then we'll get started. Latana, do you want to just make sure, as I'm starting to moderate them, just make sure to monitor the waiting room and admit people accordingly, okay?
Gotcha. Got
Great. Right. So we'll begin. Good morning, everyone, and happy Bill of Rights Day. We're very happy that you could join us today for a panel discussion with Georgia judges and students from across the state. The Bill of Rights is what we call the first 10 amendments to the US Constitution. And Bill of Rights Day, December 15th, was first proclaimed by President Franklin Roosevelt in 1941 in commemoration of what was then the 150th anniversary of the ratification of the Bill of Rights. Today, December 15th, 2020, we mark the 229th anniversary of the Bill of Rights ratification. So happy birthday, Bill of Rights. To mark the occasion, we've asked Georgia students to submit questions related to the Bill of Rights, the role of judges, and the career path to becoming a judge. I'll introduce our participating judges and schools, and then we'll just jump into the students' questions. We have judges from both trial level and appellate courts, and I'll introduce them alphabetically by last name. So first we have Chief Judge Bagley with the Superior Court for the Bell-Forsyth Judicial Circuit, Justice Bethel with the Supreme Court of Georgia, Judge Davis with our statewide business court, Chief Judge Jackson for the Superior Court for the Stone Mountain Judicial Circuit, Chief Judge McClellan, who will be joining us a little bit late. He had a meeting this morning, and he's with the Forsyth County State Court, Chief Judge McFadden with the Court of Appeals of Georgia, Judge Mingledorf with the Superior Court for the Piedmont Judicial Circuit, Vice Chief Judge Rickman with the Georgia Court of Appeals, Presiding Judge Willis with the Forsyth County Juvenile Court. Oh, great, he's joined us already. I thought he might be a tad late also because of the meeting, but he's with us already. And also Judge Kelly Wolk with the Cobb County Probate Court. Now, not to be outdone, we have four fantastic schools joining us today. We have also by alphabetical order, Alliance Academy for Innovation in Forsyth County and their teacher, Deborah Frazier McCormick. Those kids are juniors and seniors and are in special pre-law program there. We also then have Barrow Arts and Sciences Academy in Barrow County and their teacher, April Ballinger. We have Lincoln County Middle School and their teacher, Christy Ware Bryan, and Thomas County Middle School and their teacher, Charla Floyd. So welcome everybody. And I think we'll just get started with questions. So up first, we have Azaria Donnelly in the 8th grade from Thomas County. Azaria?
Person pleads the Fifth Amendment. Does that make them seem guilty?
Okay, and I think we had Judge Mingledorf who needs to take the bench at 9. So the question was, when a person pleads the Fifth Amendment, does that make them seem guilty? Judge Mingledorf?
You know, that's a great question, and good morning to everyone. That question, in my experience, usually comes up in the context of civil cases rather than criminal cases, because in criminal cases, defendants don't have to actually testify at all. And so if they want to invoke their Fifth Amendment right, they just do it by not testifying, and they don't actually have to say, I invoke my Fifth Amendment right. But what happens sometimes is in other kinds of cases, even divorce cases, for example, where somebody is accused of say, for example, driving drunk, and they don't want to be questioned about that in their divorce case. And so they say, I'm going to take my Fifth Amendment right. And the court usually will give an instruction to a witness in that setting and say to them something like, well, you can take the Fifth Amendment, that is your constitutional right. But just know that if you refuse to answer this question, the court can make an inference, can take an inference from that whatever it is you would have said might not look good or may not make you look good. And that, so in answer to your question, does it make them look guilty? In a way, yeah, it kind of does. I don't know, one of my colleagues here, one of these other esteemed judges may have a different take on that, but that's been my experience.
Do we have any other comments from other judges?
Yeah, this is, excuse me, this is Judge Asha Jackson. Good morning to everybody. I'll talk about it a little bit from the perspective of my experience as a trial court judge in the criminal case setting. And just as Judge Mingledorff said, no defendant has the burden of proof in a criminal case, meaning they don't have to prove their innocence. They don't have to disprove their guilt. However, what happens oftentimes when we question prospective jurors to sit for the cases, you will hear citizens grapple with that concept sometimes. And so what they'll say is, I understand that there's a Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate yourself, but I just think that if the defendant didn't do it, they should take the stand and testify on their own behalf. And if they don't want to do that, then they must be guilty. And so it is a bit of a struggle in that context to try to teach people the concept of a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. So I do think that some people, lay people, think that it makes a person look guilty if they don't testify on their own behalf or say that they didn't do something. So I think eventually when we seat juries, they get that concept. As judges, we instruct them. There's a court instruction that we give them, a jury instruction that we give to them, that they are to use in applying the law to the facts. But I do think that people wonder why someone wouldn't just take the stand and testify and say they didn't do something.
Very good. Thank you, Judge Jackson. Any final thoughts on this question?
Noel, I'll just add, and Azaria, thank you for what is, I think, a really important question in our legal system. I have been a juror in both a civil and a criminal case in my life. And I will tell you that there are a lot of things that the law says that I think actually sort of we get behind the curtain and juries get in the jury room. And yes, they've listened to the instructions and they've listened to the orders. The answer to your question, I think, is that legally it doesn't matter. In other words, our law says that it does not matter. But practically, when you get into jury rooms, juries follow, we assume that they follow the rules that the trial judge gave them, that Judge Jackson and others have said to them when they're going to the jury room, but we don't really know, and we are all human. And that's actually one of the things that we, as a society, say is good about the jury process, is that it is your jury of your peers. They're in there deciding those things on their own. But I suspect, strongly suspect, that many juries, despite the charges, despite the instructions they get from the judges that, hey, as a legal matter in our country, this is not supposed to matter. I do think that it probably matters in reality. It's sort of like when you walk the halls of your schools and people say, how are you today? People understand that the rules say I'm supposed to say I'm fine. Not every day is that true. But we say it to one another on a regular basis. I do think that there are places in the law, and I think it's sort of a sad, unfortunate reality, but there are places where we say, we've told the jury, you have to do this, you can't consider that, this is the rule. But I think juries probably do consider it in the way that you suggest.
Very good. Okay, fantastic. Then we'll move on to our second question, which is from Aubrey Welch, an 8th grader in Lincoln County. Aubrey?
Good morning. My question is, in court, do you find yourself looking at the Bill of Rights more than the other amendments? If so, which right do you find yourself always going to in cases today?
And Judge Bagley, did you want to tackle that first?
I'll be glad to, and thank you all for having me. And I'm Judge Bagley. I'm in Forsyth as a trial judge, Superior Court. And yes, in Superior Court, we certainly do look at the Bill of Rights more than the other amendments to the Constitution, specifically the 4th Amendment right against unreasonable searches and seizures by the police and law enforcement. That is the most common amendment that we look at in the cases that come before us. And also, we've talked about the 5th Amendment right against self-incrimination, and I won't belabor that, but that's already been talked about. Also, the 6th Amendment right to counsel. We want to make sure that that every defendant has a lawyer and is represented by counsel, and also the Sixth Amendment right to a public and speedy trial. And that's a right that is very important, and the one that us as trial judges take very seriously, especially during this time of COVID. And I know there's another question about that a little bit later on, but yeah, those are the main ones that I consider in my work.
Very good. Judge Jackson or anybody else want to chime in on which amendment in the Bill of Rights they find themselves looking at or referring to most well in court?
I think Judge Bagley stole my thunder, but he laid it out there. I think he's right. It's the Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendment. And we, as trial court judges, are always considering those, because even before you get to the trial stage, you have defendants who file motions. And the motions are oftentimes to allow the trial court to examine the very issues that Judge just.
Okay, I think we're having
while Judge Jackson recovers. You froze up for just a second, Judge Jackson.
Uh-oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was just going too. I just wanted to speak briefly about what we call a motion to suppress. Those are motions that we hear in the trial court oftentimes, and it is cause for us to examine the Fourth Amendment right that Judge Bagley just discussed with you. If you suppress evidence, for example, then oftentimes it is difficult for the prosecution to proceed in a criminal case. If the trial court suppresses that evidence due to an unreasonable search, a stop, or a seizure of your person or your property. Those are very important issues that the trial courts often examine.
Great. Thank you, Judge Jackson. And I think Judge Walk had something to add.
So I'm the probate judge, and including my mother, nobody really knows what a probate judge does. So I once had some homeschooled 4-year-olds come into my court for a homeschooling test thing. And the way that I described to 4-year-olds, because how do you do that? We discussed criminal jurisdiction versus civil jurisdiction. And I said, how many of you will be fighting how many of you have brothers and sisters? How many of you fight with your brothers and sisters? How many of you get put in timeout by your mom or your dad? That's criminal law. Adults get put in timeout. It's called jail or prison, and that's criminal law. How many of you have brothers and sisters? How many of you are in the back seat of the car? How many of you fight over toys, and your mom or your dad has to decide who gets to play with the toy or whether it needs to go to somebody else entirely? That's civil law. And that's what I do. I don't have any of this, thank God, any of this criminal jurisdiction. Unless you come in and make a fool of yourself in my courtroom, I don't put people in jail for committing crimes out in the world. I can only put them in jail for being a jerk and hold them in contempt in my court for the most part. There are a couple of exceptions to that. But one of the things that I do or a couple of the things that I do are guardianships. We do guardianships of children, but if an adult is no longer able to take care of themselves, either they have a mental health issue and they can't manage to take care of themselves, they get in a car accident and they're in the hospital, they have a head injury, whatever, or grandma forgets to take her medicine or takes too much of her medicine or forgets to eat, we do a guardianship so that somebody can take care of grandma. One of the things that we have to grapple with a lot is what is a bad decision versus what's an incompetent decision, because we don't have the right to protect people from bad decisions. Because if you want to smoke, that's a bad decision. We all know that. And we know it causes cancer. We know it's a bad decision. We know eating too many donuts is a bad decision. I do it a lot. I shouldn't eat so many donuts, but I shouldn't have a guardianship because I make bad health decisions. But if I eat donuts because I forget I'm diabetic, or I don't understand the logical conclusion that I may die from eating these donuts in a more immediate sense, or I forget to eat, or I forget to take my medication, or I send all my money to some African prince who is in desperate need, and I'm going to lose all of my money, I need someone to take care of me. But if you don't want a blood transfusion because you're a Jehovah's Witness, I can't substitute my thinking on religion to your religion. And in America, we have a right to freedom of religion. And so I can't substitute my beliefs in creating a guardianship for you on what I think you should do when you're diagnosed with a certain ailment or issue. If you have a logical decided intent to do something that I may or may not agree with, I can't just decide that you're wrong based on a number of the things. Plus, we give you an attorney because we're going to take away some fundamental rights like owning property and deciding where you get to live and if you get to marry and all of those kinds of things. So we also give you an attorney in those cases and those types of things. And you are presumed not to need a guardian until you are proven to need one. But that's just a little bit of a different take than some of the criminal general jurisdiction courts.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you, Judge Volk. Okay, I think we'll move on to our third question, which will be asked by Alana Murray with Alliance Academy in Forsyth County. Go ahead.
Hello. My question is, in Georgia and other states where criminal jury trials are currently not being held, how is that being balanced with the Sixth Amendment right to a speedy trial?
Really timely question. And we have had some jury trials start back up under a lot of guidance and protections, but I will let the judges, I think Judge Bagley wanted to jump on this, and I'm sure we have other judges wanting to speak to this really critical balancing question. So Judge Bagley?
Yes, that's a great question, of course, in the time that we're in now, and it's a problem. It's a very serious problem that I take very seriously because everyone has a constitutional right under the Sixth Amendment to a public and speedy trial. The Constitution doesn't have any exceptions for COVID-19. It doesn't. And a defendant who is sitting in jail awaiting trial is probably not concerned about COVID-19. They're concerned about the fact that they're sitting in jail and they're presumed to be innocent and they're waiting to go to trial. And they deserve and they have a right to a speedy trial, and they're not concerned about COVID-19. And so it's very hard for a trial judge to sit back and say, okay, we can't have jury trials because of COVID-19. And know that we as a trial judge have a responsibility to make sure that those defendants get a speedy and public trial. I've been trying for months to try to have a jury trial. I finally have got one scheduled on January 11th, and I'm hoping that I can go forward with it. Our public health director, I'm going to be in close contact with him to see if he has any problem or any concerns with me going forward with the jury trial. We've got all of our safety measures in place to do that, and the social distancing, the mask, and everything in our courtroom that we've set up for this. And so I'm working as hard as I can to get a jury trial going because it's that important.
Very good. Any other thoughts on balancing Sixth Amendment right to speedy trial during COVID-19? Otherwise, we'll move on. Thank you, Judge Bagley. Okay, our fourth question. Now, I'm not sure how to pronounce the student's name. It may be Angel Jaime or it may be Angel Jamie, not clear. So I apologize if I've mispronounced your name. But go ahead, from Barrow County. Here he is.
And you can put your mask down. Why did you want to become a judge?
Fantastic, good question, thank you. I think we'll start with Judge Davis and then go, hopefully before he has to leave for court, Judge Mingledorff, but Judge Davis, why did you want to become a judge?
Thanks for the question. So I am the statewide business court judge. To steal from Judge Walk, I am the fight over toys judge. Only with my court, the toys have to be rather pricey. So to get into my court, your toys have to be worth $500,000 or more. I think the thing to remember about all of the good folks on this call is they all had a call to public service, and my court's a little bit less than a year old right now, and so the question about why I wanted to become a judge is rather fresh in my mind. Mine comes from my parents. Both my mother and father were in public service. My mom was a school teacher for the better part of her life. My dad spent 41 years in the Army. And so the opportunity when it arose to serve and to start my court was one that I couldn't turn down, largely because my kids, who were a little bit younger than you all, I wanted to sort of pass on that same example that my folks had passed on to me. And I can tell you, having only been on the bench for less than a year in a court that's only been operating for about 4 months, you're reminded about the importance of what they call the rule of law in our system of government. The weightiness that goes along with being a judge, where, what you say happens when you say you can or cannot do something. And the folks in your court go on and follow what you tell them to do. That's a pretty weighty thing. And I don't think it's something that I had a full appreciation until I put on the robe and actually started giving direction as to what to do and what not to do. And so I think I'm perfectly happy being a fight over pricey toys judge. The idea of dealing with the weighty decisions day in and day out of criminal law and competency, like Judge Wolk talked about, I will leave to the other great judges on this call. But thank you for the question.
And Judge Mingledorff, did you have anything to add on why you wanted to become a judge?
Yeah, I really appreciate what Judge Davis had to say about the call to service, and also what he had to say about, and by the way, I'm also in Barrow County, so I know Angel or Angel, or however you say that, is in Barrow County, and our circuit is Barrow, Jackson, and Banks. But I just wanted to say that that the law and working in the law is a service profession, and sometimes, especially kids, will say something like, "It must be fun to be able to tell people what to do," and I think Judge Davis hit on it. It's more weighty than it is fun. There's an expression that is applied to judges that a person is as sober as a judge. It's a terrible burden sometimes to have to make a decision about custody or make a decision about whether someone goes to jail or prison. But it is a great blessing in my life. And I think for all of these esteemed judges on this panel, I can't speak for them, but I expect they maybe have experienced the same thing, to be able to participate in a system that allows us to see difficult, terribly difficult problems resolved in a peaceful way. And it can be anything from the people having a landline dispute, neighbors who can't decide where their property line is, or an argument over custody. It could even be an argument over who won the presidential election. And think of it, judges get to participate, and so do lawyers, in a system that allows us to settle these terribly, terribly difficult issues peacefully. And I always think of the role of judges and lawyers as being that of being a peacemaker. And to me, it is a great privilege and blessing in my life. And it is a calling, I think, for all of us to be a peacemaker and to be able to participate in a system that allows us to do that. So thank you for the great question. And with that, I think I am going to have to excuse myself because I have hearings coming up in just a few minutes. So thank you so much for allowing me to participate.
Thank you so much, Judge. Appreciate you. Are there any final thoughts on why you wanted to become a judge from any of our participating judges?
Well, my dad was a judge, and I wear his robe.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? Final thoughts on why you wanted to become a judge? Great. Then moving on to our fifth question, we have Owen May, who's an 8th grader down on the Florida-Georgia line in Thomas County. Owen?
How are the Georgia Bill of Rights and the U.S. Bill of Rights different or the same?
Really good question. And that we're going to throw that tough nugget over to Judge McFadden, Chief Judge.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Owen. It was a hard one. I actually had to do some homework to get ready to answer it. Well, the Georgia Bill of Rights is longer. It's 30 paragraphs as opposed to 10 amendments. You know, the Bill of Rights is the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, as you all know. So it's in a sense an afterthought. The Georgia Bill of Rights has pride of place as Article 1, Section 1 of the state constitution. There's a lot of overlap. The Georgia Bill of Rights echoes a lot of the language in the federal Bill of Rights. And the basic rule about how they interact is, this is jargon, but it's also regular language, preemption, which is to say that the federal law outranks the state law. So the federal Bill of Rights gives certain protections. Georgia can give more, but it cannot take away any rights that the federal Bill of Rights gives to citizens. So some of the identical language can have different meanings. And on this, I've got a war story, which is what judges and lawyers talk about their past adventures. I think that's jargon too. Back when I was practicing law, somebody came into me, and I was an appeals lawyer, so I practiced in front of the Court of Appeals in the Supreme Court. And they said I'd been sentenced to 30 days in jail for trespassing on my next door neighbor's property by trimming my hedges too close to the property line. And he threw me in jail for 30 days. Now this was, we heard earlier about 4-year-olds squabbling in the back of a backseat of a car, and basically this case was a lot like that. So this woman had really gotten on the judge's last nerve. But he threw the book at her for something pretty minor, and he said, well, cruel and unusual punishment. And then looked at the law, and I looked at the cases that have construed what that law means, and it came clear to me that under the federal Bill of Rights, and the language is pretty much the same, they both say that the cruel and unusual punishment shall not be inflicted. They pretty much line right up. But under the federal law, it didn't have a case. The state law, we did. So I filed an appeal saying, hey, this is a cruel and unusual punishment under the state constitution. And I got it reversed. Other areas, the language is different. You know, the freedom of religion is in the First Amendment of the federal Constitution. It's just one clause, and it's actually a clause that's commonly called the non-establishment clause. It just says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting free exercise thereof. Well, Georgia, the right to religion spreads out over 2 full paragraphs, and it talks about the unalienable right to worship God, and no one shall be molested or prohibited from holding any office as a consequence of their religion, provided that the right shall not be construed to excuse acts of licentiousness or practices inconsistent with peace and safety. So quite a bit more language. And there's also some extra stuff in the Georgia Constitution. There is a prohibition on whipping and banishment beyond the limits of the state. There's kind of a funny story about that, because sometimes judges do want to banish people. And what they will do is they will banish them from 158 counties Every county, usually they pick Toombs County, which I think you may, it's not too far from you where you are, Owen. Say, well, you can be only in that county in rural South Georgia. There's also a prohibition on legislation regarding social status. There is, in 2008, there was added a long provision that's sometimes called the Victims' Bill of Rights, which gives crime victims rights to notice about proceedings and so forth. And finally, there is a provision that says the tradition of fishing and hunting shall be preserved. There's more, but I'll stop.
Thank you, Chief Judge. Appreciate that. And with that, I think we'll move on to our sixth question. That's going to be from Bryson Dawkins in 8th grade out in Lincoln County. They're on the South Carolina-Georgia line. So, Bryson?
My question is, if we did not have any Bill of Rights, how do you think the present United States would be different?
Fantastic. Okay, Justice Bethel, did you want to handle that?
I'll give it a shot, Noel. Thank you, Bryson, for the question. Go Red Devils. I know right where Lincoln County is. It's a fascinating question, Bryson, because I think there are some sort of obvious answers that you could point to, and you could say, well, we came out of the British tradition. We were part of the United Kingdom at the time, and you could say maybe our path would have generally followed the legal tradition of that country and the countries associated with the United Kingdom. And I don't think that would necessarily be wrong, so that you could look and see that they don't quarter troops anymore either. I mean, we sort of look at quartering of troops in the Bill of Rights and people think, why did anybody ever think this was a problem and why did it need to be in the Constitution? Well, it was a problem because troops literally lived in the homes of colonists, and not just in the United States, but within the British Empire around the world. And people said, this is intolerable. We are not okay with it. And of course, today, if we were writing a new constitution, other than knowing that history, I doubt anybody would say, well, that really needs to be up front and center. We need to put this in here to make sure that because it doesn't happen really anywhere in the Western world today. Would that be the same? Probably. When would it have happened and how? It's hard to say. I do think it's fair to say that what many of the founding and subsequent generations called the American experiment did result in thought leadership. It set trajectories that most of the Western world has since followed in respect to the things that are in the Bill of Rights. But it does not follow that we would be the same. I mean, there's definitively a current difference in the way we think about privacy and the way we think about free speech than sort of our cousins across the pond do, or the English do. We have more protections, and those flow directly from the Bill of Rights. But even within the Bill of Rights, Bryce, I think that there were deficiencies within the original Constitution, and that's why we set up a system for amendments. But we can see that the people have definitely seen fit for necessary amendments even after those first 10. So maybe if we didn't have the Bill of Rights, we would have gotten them at some point later. But that's a big if. And would they have looked the same as they look? I can't, you can't look forward, but you also can't look past and imagine a different history. But it's a fascinating question, I think, to think about. I do think that our functional governmental system, our legal system, would have evolved in very similar veins. But I think that the Bill of Rights definitely set a tone that continues to echo. And I'm thankful that the founding generation put them there.
Yes, thank you, Justice Bethel. And Judge Rickman, did you have anything to add on how you think the U.S. would be different if we didn't have the Bill of Rights?
Yes, thank you. And I want to give a shout out to our Barrow class. I know where you're at the Arts and Sciences Academy, and my nieces and nephews live right across from you. I saw your school the other day when I was visiting because I can see it from their house. But, simply put, here's what I think. You guys have all seen how divided our country is right now politically. And as long as you have a Bill of Rights, and as long as you have judges who, though they may disagree somewhat in interpretation, do their best to follow precedent and follow the Bill of Rights. It doesn't matter what team wins, what side of the political aisle is in charge, we have that protector. We have those Bill of Rights that guarantee us some basic fundamental rights that hopefully we can all depend on. And to answer your question, the way it would be different, like Justice Bethel said, we can't guarantee what it would look like, but here's what we know. We know that without a Bill of Rights, one team may do something really different than the other team, right? And so law may look very differently from political party to political party. But with that Bill of Rights, we know we have some basic fundamental protections. Whatever the precedent says, provided we apply it faithfully, can be consistent so that there's not so much upheaval, and so that people can be, though they may be disappointed that their political party loses, they can be somewhat assured that, hey, we're going to keep going. We're going to be okay. We're going to have some basic protections. You know, we're not going to have troops quartered. We're not going to have all these, you guys may hear in political discourse, people make these crazy predictions. Oh no, so-and-so won, so this is the horrible thing that's going to happen. Well, the Bill of Rights, quite frankly, keeps a lot of those horrible things from happening. That's kind of the way I look at it. Thanks so much for the question.
Thank you. Fantastic. All right, we'll move on to question 7. Do we have Janaya Hadzi?
Hi, I'm Sophia Volkova, and I'll be asking Janaya's question today. So historically and statistically, people of color receive harsher sentences than their white counterparts. Judges play a role in this, and so how do you overcome your conscious and unconscious bias to ensure that you're being fair and consistent in sentencing?
Great. And to tackle this thorny question, but really insightful and an excellent question, we have first up Judge Bagley and then Judge Jackson, if you want to jump into.
Yes, very important question, especially for a Forsyth County judge, as I am. This comes from a Forsyth County student there at the, hello everybody, all you guys from Alliance Academy in Forsyth County. I've been over there to talk to y'all before on a couple of occasions, and I appreciate this question. Forsyth County has a racist history. Thankfully, today in the year 2020, a lot of people who've moved into the metro Atlanta area really don't know about that history. And we've got probably a lot of residents who don't know about that history. But it does. I'm a lifelong resident of Forsyth County, so I know firsthand about the racist history of our county. And so I catch myself bending over backward to make sure that there's not even a hint of a perception that a person of color is not going to receive a fair shake when they come into my courtroom. I'm very, very conscious of that. And so I make that concerted effort, and I think it's the right thing to do. I want to make sure that everyone is treated fairly without regard to color. And we actually have the statue of Lady Justice out front with the blindfold over her eyes, and that's symbolic of the law, which does not see color, and that's the way I think it should be, and I hope that it is everywhere. I will defer to Judge Jackson.
Thank you. I think that is an important question as well. And what I'll say is, this is a pretty bold statement, but I'm going to say it. I think that conscious and unconscious bias occurs oftentimes with people of color as well. Because I think you have to push yourself to challenge your perceptions and thoughts. And that includes me. And I'd like to think that I'm pretty informed just because of my own history and background. I'll just tell you, very briefly, I grew up in the metro Atlanta area. I went to an inner city high school. My mom's side of the family is Caribbean, so they're immigrants from Jamaica. It's a very proud history that I have. They worked very hard when they came to this country. I am not a first-generation college graduate. My grandmother graduated from Columbia University. It's an Ivy League school. And so on that side of the family, there is an expectation of excellence. My dad's side of the family were poor and from the south side of Chicago, and he was a swimmer and went to Tuskegee. My grandfather on my mother's side was a Tuskegee airman. So I'm proud of that legacy. But I'm also proud that I grew up in an inner city high school because it allowed me to get to know people who had backgrounds that were different other than my own background. They may have had the same skin complexion, but their background was very different. And so even in the position that I'm in now, I'm in DeKalb County, which is, I believe, the most culturally and racially diverse county in the state. Oftentimes there are things that I have to consider that perhaps challenge my own way of thinking. I'll give you an example. One of the types of hearings that we hear as judges concerns the commitment of individuals who have tested positive for communicable diseases like tuberculosis. If you don't take your medication, you are picked up and you are incarcerated so that you do not infect other people and that you can receive appropriate treatment. There was an individual who was incarcerated. I had a hearing. You have to have a due process hearing for those individuals who was here on a work visa from Mexico. And he kept saying, it's not that I don't want to take the medication. It's just that I need to work so I can send money home to my family. And one of the physicians who was treating him from the health department said, see, Judge, he's just not going to be compliant because, you know, it is important to him that he not follow the rules. And I said, well, I'm not so sure that that is what it is about for him. I don't know that he necessarily understood the importance of why he had to take the medication, but what became culturally important for him was that he send money back home to his family. So see, there are certain perceptions that we have. There are certain cultural rules that exist that do play into our consideration of the facts as judges. And I think it is incumbent upon us as elected officials, as judges, to take into consideration some of those things. So it's not always just black and white. You have to, we're human at the end of the day, and we're individuals. And so we have to remember that. And as a judge, a Black woman, I think people oftentimes look to me to be the authority on these issues, but I myself have to consider my own thoughts and perceptions about some of these issues. So I will tell you this, it's no secret that there are a lot of things going on in our society. I think it's brought to the forefront issues that have always existed. For example, I know you have seen that people are raising issues in the law enforcement community, and people feel very strongly that, you know, law enforcement should be protected. And then there are individuals who've had some challenges with law enforcement. That's real. We hear that on both sides when we pick juries, and it comes up in trial issues. But I just think at the end of the day, we're human. We have to exercise a little grace and some empathy to understand each other's perspective culturally, and that we are not, we're not so smart as judges that we can't learn sometimes. And that includes myself. And so I, like Judge Bagley, am very committed to making sure that the people who come before me, who appear in front of me, even if they are not successful, they feel like they got a fair hearing, that they were heard, that I followed the law, and that was irrespective of their skin color or their culture. That's what's important.
Thank you. Thank you both, Judge Jackson and Judge Bagley, for that, addressing that very important question. And with that, we'll move down to question number.
Nicole, may I add something to that very briefly?
Sure.
I recently had an opportunity to help plan for a seminar for judges on implicit bias. And I've taken the implicit bias tests both on the racial axis and the gender axis. And the way they operate, it's a little like playing with the disorientation that you'll get if you type the word blue in red ink and the word red in blue ink and play around with that. And having gone through that experience, I was frankly dismayed to discover how much implicit, unconscious bias is going on in my head. And I think pretty much anybody who takes those tests will have the same experience. And the observation I have is a partial way to deal with it is continuously think about when you encounter somebody, ask yourself the question is how, I ask myself the question, how is this person's physical appearance affecting my impression of them? And sometimes I catch myself in that way.
Fantastic, thank you. Yes, any final thoughts on implicit bias or otherwise? Okay. So with that, we'll move on to question number 8. And I want to note that Judge McClellan's been able to join us. He had meetings this morning, but he's now on with us. So this next question, I think we'll go with Justice Bethel and then Judge McClellan if you're up for it. But now I'd like to call to the mic Lucy Bugg in 8th grade in Barrow County. Lucy.
Why do adults get sent straight to prison and don't get rehabilitated? Wouldn't crime rates decrease if people were help? This doesn't necessarily mean they don't deserve prison time too. I'm just curious as to why people aren't rehabilitated for the betterment of themselves and the public.
Thank you.
So Lucy, you ask a very important and very timely question. And I want to thank Sophia for asking Janai's question. I knew based on our little preview that I was coming up, so I didn't jump in. The last 2 questions, Lucy's question and Janai's question, I'm going to ask you all, everybody in all 4 classes, to keep asking those questions. Do not stop, and do not let anybody say that, oh, well, you're young and you don't understand. These are the questions that need to be asked in Georgia. They need to be asked across our country and in our culture. So you keep asking them and you're going to get different answers. Some of those answers you're going to think are good answers and bad answers, but don't stop asking those questions because they are both critical to the state that you're going to inherit from previous generations and that you already are an owner in. Lucy, there is a real effort afoot in Georgia and across the nation to address your question. The answer is they should be. So everybody heard Lucy's question is, why don't we do more to rehabilitate instead of sort of the answer is incarceration, and if that doesn't work, more incarceration is answer 2. When I was first elected to the Georgia Senate, one of the issues I campaigned on was that we needed to have criminal justice reform. The folks that you're talking to today are bound by something called the Canon of Judicial Ethics. We're no longer able to advocate for policy positions. That's not something that judges are allowed to do. But in that stage of my life, it's something that I really thought needed attention. And I happened to be lucky to enter the legislature at the same time as Governor Deal, who made criminal justice reform a central element of his administration in the state. A lot of work has been done. I actually carried the juvenile justice reform bill from that effort in the state Senate. A lot of work has been done and continues and needs to be done. The fruits of that labor take a long time to work their way through the system in the same way that the burdens that we will all be experiencing will last for a long time. I think that it takes a long time to see change because the folks that have sentences have their sentence. And so there's a lot of effort working on State Board of Pardons and Paroles and other places to look at how we can, within the law, perhaps accelerate people towards lower intensity confinement opportunities. I read a delightful story just within the last month about folks who are allowed in some of our prison systems to have day labor, in other words, go out and work. And this was an individual who was released late to work because he had an early release. It was just a delightful story. And the owner said, of course, being late to work is not going to punish you on the day you're early released from prison, and then straight into work on the day they got out of prison. I can think of many other things I'd like to do on my release day than do that work. But the answer is yes. Now, within that, yes, always remember that society, there's multiple reasons people go to prison. for people that are truly violent and have demonstrated a lack of capacity to protect themselves, then they're probably always going to be in some sort of incarceration setting because we haven't figured out a way to live safely with those people. But for the balance of folks, there is an effort to rethink that. And there's a lot of fascinating models around the world. It will take a long-term solution to address that. I do, Noel, I've already spoken longer than I should have, but since I've got the floor, I want to hold it on the last question too. And I really appreciate Judge Bagley and Judge Jackson and the Chief Judge McFadden, all of their comments. And I just want to say that when I think, well, let me start this way. Raise your hand in our classes. You judges, if you want to, you can, but raise your hand in our classes, because I'm really thinking about the young people. If you have had an adult tell you that one of the problems you have as a child is that you think you know everything. Yes, right. Okay, so here's the truth of that. It is one of the problems you have as a child, but it has nothing to do with you being a child. It actually has to do with you becoming an adult, because adults think they know everything too. And throughout, when I was your age, I thought I knew most everything. I mean, I figured there was probably some value in continuing in school. There might be something out there that I could learn. But we continue to have that. And it is a constant process of disabusing yourself. In other words, fixing that framework that allows you to grow as a person throughout your young adulthood and even your adulthood. And so what I'll say with that, and Judge Jackson really sparked this thought in me, is that when I look back now at my current age and stage in life and as a parent and all those sorts of things, I am horrified by my previous ignorance and the actions I took related to that previous ignorance at many stages, things that didn't even occur to me that I didn't know. And I am terrified by my current ignorance. Right. So I'm horrified by my past ignorance, but I'm terrified by my current ignorance because I don't know what it is that's in me. And I can think that I'm engaging with the world in a gender or race or religiously neutral way. And I don't know what I don't know. And so it's incumbent upon all of us as people, as neighbors, as human beings, to continue to sort of attack our own ignorance aggressively, like think about, where can I learn what I don't know? And that doesn't just mean on these issues that you're talking about, the racial inequality and sentencing. There's tons of things we don't know. And so if we aggressively attack our ignorance, then we can defeat it, or at least beat it back on a consistent basis. So keep asking those questions. They are critical questions. None of us have answered them adequately today, but at least we're thinking about them. So anyway, thanks, Noel.
Thank you. Fantastic, Judge McClellan. And also we have our Judge Willis has yet to speak, our one juvenile court judge that we have on the line today. So I invite both Judge McClellan and Judge Willis to chime in on that question about why people aren't rehabilitated and rather just incarcerated.
Thank you, Noel. I'm Judge McClellan. I actually preside over a state court, which is a limited jurisdiction court. So all of the people that I see that are charged with crimes can only go to jail for 12 months at a time for each count or each charge that they are facing in state court. So we as state court judges kind of have a unique opportunity because we think pretty much everybody that comes into our court based on the charges that they have can be rehabilitated. There's something that we can do for them during the time that we have them. That's not true for everybody. I began my career as a prosecutor, and I prosecuted some pretty horrible people that I hope will never, ever see the light of day in society again because of the things that they did to children, to victims. And I also defended people that I was sure weren't guilty and wanted to fight as hard as I could to make sure they got their day in court and hope that they could get the help that they needed to correct whatever was going on that caused them to do the things that they were charged with. So some of that is a perspective that you have as to where you are in the system, what role you're playing. Also, I'm old enough to remember that what we now call the Department of Corrections used to be called the Department of Offender Rehabilitation. And there was a concerted effort made at the state level to focus on rehabilitation as opposed to just incarceration. That pendulum seems to swing back and forth in society based on a number of factors. But I think, as Justice Bethel alluded to, Georgia is probably unique in the efforts that we have made to focus on getting people well who have problems with alcohol and drugs. And that's through our accountability courts. And I think almost every trial judge on this panel presides over one of our accountability courts. I have a DUI court, so I focus on people who are charged with multiple DUI offenses, and we focus on trying to get them better. And we see them as people, not as cases. We, as judges, I often say that, you know, the people that you see the most are the ones that act up the most. They're messing up if you see them a lot. But in our DUI courts and our accountability courts, we get to see them get better over time and hopefully have done enough for them that they will remain changed and become productive members of society. I think the accountability court arena is a new area, so there hopefully will be job opportunities that have never been available before in the criminal justice system to work on what we call therapeutic justice, accountability courts, problem-solving courts. You can call them anything that you want, but Georgia, thanks to the work of Justice Bethel when he was a legislator, and other people, Georgia spends almost $30 million a year supporting those courts at the state level. And that is even in this time of a budget crisis with all of the things that are going on with the pandemic. So I think that is one of the ways that the courts have been focusing on trying to get people well as opposed to just punishing them and putting them away from society. Justice Bethel is right. There's some people that you don't want out on the street again, that society is afraid of them committing other crimes. There are other people that just need some help getting better. And I think that's one of the difficult parts of being a judge, is trying to figure out who that person is in front of you and whether that person is someone that this community needs to be separated from, or they need to be separated from the community, or whether there's somebody that can work towards getting better and being productive. And I'm proud of the work that I've done. It's probably the most rewarding work that I've done as a judge, is working with these individuals across every socioeconomic, any type of person, because drugs and alcohol, they don't discriminate. They affect everybody. And it doesn't matter what your background is, you can be affected by it. And to see those people get better and to watch them graduate and go on to lead those productive lives is probably the most rewarding thing that I think I can do as a judge to support my community.
Thank you, Judge McClellan. Judge Willis, did you have anything on that, especially from the juvenile court perspective? And I also want to briefly note, I know we're coming up on our hour. If our students need to drop off this call, that's perfectly fine. I think we'll be wrapping up shortly with some final comments from our judges, but if you do need to drop off, it's fine to hop off. And thank you for being with us this morning. But Judge Willis, please.
Thank you. Well, certainly I was going to mention what Judge McClellan just mentioned, which is, as I looked around on this Zoom call, the other trial judges on this call, I think we all preside over an accountability court. I have a family treatment court. We have adult drug courts, mental health courts, veterans courts, and DUI court, as Judge McClellan just talked about. And that's been a big factor in trying to do what this question is asking about, which is to provide opportunities for rehabilitation rather than incarceration. Juvenile court is different, of course, because what I have jurisdiction over is at least for criminal type offenses, is anyone who's under the age of 17. And so they don't go to prison. There's the potential that someone under 17 could go to a youth detention center. But juvenile court has always been, from the time that they were created, a court about rehabilitation. It's in the delinquency or criminal side of things, it's always been about what can we do to help this young person deal with the issues that are causing them to make these choices that are getting them into trouble, either at home or with the law. And then even on the civil side, what we call dependency cases is about families who are having struggles and difficulties, and how can we help that family be rehabilitated so that they can manage life without needing the support and oversight of the court. So juvenile court is unique in that it's pretty much always been and still is focused on rehabilitation, but certainly that approach has become more prevalent in the adult courts as well, as you heard described.
Yes, fantastic. Great. Okay, then I just want to take a moment to thank everybody, our amazing panel of judges and our wonderful students out all across the state of Georgia. I will now, in reverse alphabetical order, go through our judges and just invite you to give any concluding remarks. So we'll start with Judge Wolk.
I just want to tell you all, thank you. The fact that you sat here and listened to us is a compliment to us, and we appreciate it greatly. I started out working in television. I worked in television for 10 years. I ended my TV career working for the Utah Jazz, scaling the Delta Center with very heavy cables, and decided that I wanted to go to law school so I could be a sports and entertainment lawyer, obviously. And so here I am as a probate judge in Cobb County, Georgia. So do what you love and do what challenges you. Don't stop asking questions. I think everybody on this who knows me would say that I tend to be on the outspoken side. I tend to ask annoying questions, and I talk a lot, but I also very, very much at my core hope for fairness and decency and equality where we can achieve it. And I hope for you all that you continue to learn and question and grow. And I wish you the best of luck and safety in this unusual time. And thanks for your attention. I'm going to drop off and go do some guardianships. Y'all be well.
Thank you, Judge. Great. Judge Willis, again from Juvenile Court in Forsyth County.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. I've enjoyed being a part of this forum today, and certainly am encouraged by the young people being engaged and interested in these issues. And to my neighbors down the street at the Alliance Academy, hopefully I'll be able to come visit y'all when this pandemic is over. And I also have to start court as of 5 minutes ago, so I'm going to sign off as well. Y'all have a great day.
Thank you, Judge. Now we have Vice Chief Judge Rickman with the Court of Appeals. Any final thoughts?
Thank you so much. And to all you kids and teachers, but particularly you kids, thanks so much. And what I want to say to you is, if you have a goal, if you want to accomplish something, don't let cynical people tell you that you can't. Fight to accomplish that goal. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter where you start. It only matters where you're going. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise. And we are so happy to be with you.
Thank you so much, Judge. We had Judge Mingledorf with us, but he had to drop off to start court. So we'll go with Chief Judge McFadden with the Court of Appeals. Your final thoughts.
Thank you all for having us. I guess a final word I'd like to offer you, in addition to all the other advice, is welcome and focus and concentrate on critical thinking as you go through your classwork. What courts are very largely about, and what I think is vital to our democratic system, is a process where truth is preeminent, where details matter, where evidence matters, where reason prevails over rhetoric, where arguments are thought about and responded to on the merits. And I hope that as you continue your studies, those fundamental lessons are lessons that you will carry forth into your roles as citizens and in whatever professions you undertake.
Thank you. Okay, Chief Judge McClellan, Forsyth County State Court, your final thoughts?
Thank you. It's hard to follow those that have come before me, but just challenge you the same as the other judges have, is to keep asking those hard questions and demanding answers to those questions. They're questions that society has faced down through the ages in different ways, and we respond to them in different ways at different times. And I like to think that as we mature as societies, we get better at providing the answers to those questions. And a lot of those answers are going to come from your generation and how you see the world and the mark that you make on it. And so think, as Judge McFadden said, learn to think critically about any issue that you have questions about, to look at all the sides of it and to try to make a reasoned opinion about how you stand on that issue, and then fight for your position. And same as it goes for your career. I hope some of you will choose the law as a career. We need good lawyers. And mock trial is a great way to do that. If you haven't participated in mock trial, ask about it. I don't know what's going to happen this year with it. I've been fortunate enough to preside over our regional competition and district competitions here in Forsyth County for a number of years now. And it's wonderful to see how students respond to the problems and the issues that they grapple with, and do all the things that Judge McFadden was talking about in preparing a case. And oftentimes they're better prepared than most of the lawyers that we see. So that would be my challenge. And I thank you for setting this up and participating. This is a great way to have this kind of interaction. I think we as judges are learning that technology can be our friend, even though we like to do things the traditional way. But this is an opportunity that we would never have had without Zoom, or something like it. So I'm thrilled to be part of it. Thank you for your participation and for your the questions that you posed to us. And I also have a calendar, so I'm going to drop off and wish you all a good day and a good holiday season.
Thank you so much. Perfect. Chief Judge Jackson, the Superior Court for the Stone Mountain Judicial Circuit. Your final thoughts for today?
Yeah, I just want to challenge everybody here, because you guys are so bright and I'm so encouraged by the questions and the conversation today. Challenge yourself to do that which is uncomfortable. Challenge yourself to do that which is uncomfortable. One tip that I give a lot of the students that I talk to, and actually adults as well, is that when you enter a room, try to find the person that looks the most different or opposite from you. You will find that it will become easier to have conversations with people. You can learn a lot from people. It will help you to be even more outstanding than you already are when you can move in a room and engage with people who are not like yourself. It's very easy to congregate around people who look like you and like to do the things that you like to do. But you will find that even if someone looks different from you, you have more in common. I think we have more in common, all of us. We're more alike than we are different. And you only know that if you challenge yourself to do that which is uncomfortable. So good luck to everybody here. I really love being part of this panel. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Judge. Fantastic. Judge Davis, our statewide business court judge, your final thoughts?
My first thought is, how do I follow that? Fantastic. I don't have any grand words of wisdom for you. I sat here reflecting on how I wish that when I was your age, I had this opportunity to participate in something like this, because I too had the curiosity that you have. And so many of your questions, almost all of them, started off with why. And hopefully today, some of the people you heard from provided you with sort of the openings to look deeper into the answers to the questions that you asked. And if this can be the beginning of that sort of exploration into the curiosity of why things are the way they are and what you can do to change things or to support the things that you feel strongly about, then I think we can declare today a success. But with that curiosity comes the opportunity to not only ask the hard questions, but really explore your own set of beliefs and really look deeper into why things are the way they are.
Very good. Thank you, Judge Davis. Justice Bethel, concluding thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Noel. I'll try to be brief. I know y'all have heard more from us than you signed up for today. I'll say this. One is just a request to be valuable. Think of yourself as a part of society, and how can you be valuable to society? The answer is to learn. The answer is to listen. The answer is to look for ways to solve problems that other people are having. I promise you, if you do that, your problems will be few and seem smaller. And so just think about, how can I be valuable to the community, whether it's my immediate community, in my classroom, in my school, or beyond, wherever I am, how can I be valuable? And the last piece I'll say is, you asked a whole lot of excellent questions that we didn't reach. I am on Facebook. I am on Instagram. I am on Twitter. My kids will not let me be on Snapchat. But if you want to reach out to me through those platforms, I will make every effort to be responsive to you, because your questions are good and deserve thoughtful responses. And we work for you. Sometimes not everybody in government remembers that. You are our bosses. So we appreciate you, and that'll be it.
Very good. Thank you, Justice Bethel. And yes, we will try to get through all these questions in one way or another, perhaps through social media or again at some future date. But last but not least, Chief Judge Bagley for the Superior Court of the Bell Forsyth Judicial Circuit, your final thoughts.
Okay, well, I get to be last, I guess. So thank you for the invitation. It's been fun to try to field these very difficult questions. The Bill of Rights is fundamental to the fabric of our democracy. And I want to urge everyone, all of you, just to fight for those rights, because there are those in this country who would want to take those rights away from us and from you. And never let that happen. Always fight to make sure that the Bill of Rights stands, because it stood the test of time, and we just need to keep the Bill of Rights in place unchanged. So thank you again for the invitation. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I invite any of my Judicial Council AOC colleagues to share any final thoughts, or if not, with that, I say thank you very, very much to our participating judges and our wonderful teachers and students throughout the state. We really do go out of our way not to be metro-centric, and I couldn't be happier by the geographic diversity we have. We have Thomas County and Lincoln County and Barrow County and Forsyth County. So I wish everybody a happy Bill of Rights Day, and I hope we can do this again next year. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye now.